All right, we are live. I found this I found this blog recently, and it's beautiful. A blog post is a very long and complex source query to find fascinating people and make them route interesting stuff to your inbox. A blog post. And something similar is what Signal said recently. So he was like, not this one, this one. I accidentally built a channel where really smart people keep hitting me up, builders, thinkers, people doing weird, cool shit. And as if this was my number one con where everyone wants more of this, especially investors. I always understood why 16C media is a thing, but I had never felt it until now. Distribution is a magnet, and the strength of the magnet is some combo of novel insights, novel packaging, and staying in the game for a long time. And this is it. This is it. You just have to create content. You just have to put your thoughts out there, and then you will, by publishing content, you are putting your thoughts out there. People will find common interests. You will become friends with them, and then they will start routing interesting stuff to you. And now you are finding things that you wouldn't have found yourself. I was born in July 1989, which means I am of the last generation who will remember the time before the internet. Cables and data centers and hyperlinks grew up around me. They grew with me. I find it hard to disentangle the evolution of my psyche from that of the internet. Explaining it to my daughter, who was born in 2017, a year when the world's largest economy had begun tearing itself apart from the tension of this ever evolving network. I tell her that the internet is like an alien intelligence. We don't know exactly what it is. It has just landed, and only the first ship we are trying to figure out how to talk to it. The first generation of explorers have noted that by making certain finger motions, you can make the alien show you images of cats on clothes or tell you all the ways the world is falling apart. For a long time, I thought this was all there was to it. I could tap the keyboard in a particular way and screen show me the weather or tell me which translation of the Iliad to read and then make someone jump in a truck and drive it to our house. I preferred the Iliad to the screen. But then late 2021, after I had been making intricate finger movements again, I woke up before sunrise and noticed that something had changed. During the night, the internet had been set in motion, tossing hither and thither in silence as the fields lay frozen and waiting, and the hedgehog slept in its pile of leaves. The internet had rearranged itself around me. I'd written an essay about Ivan Illich and systems thinking, a topic I had never found anyone else intrigued by, and which magazines thought below a rejection letter. And the internet had suddenly reshaped itself so that my keyboard hooked up the screen. I'm not vibing with the sentences over here, they don't flow naturally, but okay. Keyboard hooked up to the screens of a bunch of people who wanted to talk about these topics, and a little later, the keyboards hooked up to mine. I'd written for 15 years, but never before had this happen. I had conjured a minor conference, and I hadn't even known that you could do that. This gave me a first glimpse of the social mechanics of the internet. Looking at the traffic data and talking to readers, I could retrace how my words had traveled through the network, and I got a sense of why. I didn't fully understand it. I don't think anyone does, but like a scientist who's got hold of an alien artifact, I proceeded by gleefully and semi randomly pushing every button I could find to see what happened. I would think of a series of funny finger movements, and then I would say to myself, lol, I wonder what this combination does, and then I would try. The way the machine seemed to work was the more precise and niche the words I input, the better the internet would match me with people I could forge meaningful relationships with. This precision was hard for me, partly because my sense of how communication is supposed to work is shaped by reading mass media. Writing for a general public, you need to be broad and a bit bland. I didn't want a general public, I wanted a specific set of people, the people who could help me along as a human being obsessed with certain intellectual problems. I didn't know who these people were, I only knew that they existed, hence my writing was a search query. It needed to be phrased in such a way that it found these people and, if necessary, filtered others. The pleasant parts of the internet seem to be curated by human beings, not algorithms. For my writing to find its way to this nether world, I needed to have a rough sense of how information flowed down there. The pattern was this: words flowed from the periphery to the centers. This was a surprisingly rapid stream. Then the words cascaded from the center down in a broader but slower stream to the periphery again. I'll spend the rest of this essay unpacking those two statements. It will seem like I am mainly talking about how to use writing to forge meaningful relationships. I think doing that is beautiful and important, but lurking behind it is a larger idea. Namely, that you can shape yourself by reshaping your relationships. By changing who you are addressing and the responses you garner, you steer your development. You become more agentic. You become more agentic. Oh, wow. Okay. I think we will keep finding hyperlinks and hyperlinks and hyperlinks. Very interesting. The syntax of social search queries. How long is this post? Okay. Human brains are wired such that we get rewarded for attending to surprisal. If we turn our attention toward things that surprise us, we get excited and our model of the world changes. It grows more complex. Human brains are wired such that we get rewarded for attending to surprisal. If we turn our attention toward things that surprise us, we get excited and our model of the world changes. This is easy at first. My 1-year-old was in complete rapture today on seeing a hen, but after a while, hens do not surprise us anymore, even if they are scratching dirt. We need a bigger hit to get the same high. To make hens interesting again, you could perhaps read about how they originally lived in the jungle, or you might get into the biology of egg production, or more likely you will pursue something more interesting than hens. Any which way, by pursuing your interests, you will move toward complexity. The simple things do not surprise you anymore, so you turn your attention to more complicated things. This is an amazing algorithm. Do interesting things and magically arrive at a complex understanding of the world. Do interesting things and magically arrive at a complex understanding of the world. Sadly, it also leads you down a path that will likely end in existential loneliness and sobbing. What leads you there is the fact that the particular complexity that catches your interest is highly idiosyncratic. People get interested in all sorts of things. I have heard from credible sources that there even exist people who are interested in the names of Brazilian soccer players. Having idiosyncratic interests that grow in complexity means that if you pursue them too far, you will end up obsessed with things that no one else around you cares about. There is a counteracting force in that humans tend to mimic the interests of those around them. But this is of little help for those of us for whom those around them mostly mean niche bloggers, contributors at Wikipedia, and Erasmus of Rotterdam. Erasmus of Rotterdam. I've heard that before. Most influential thinkers of the Northern Renaissance and one of the major figures of Dutch and Western culture. Okay. Okay, so they're basically saying while Renaissance was happening in the South, Italy and France, Erasmus was the only guy in Amsterdam in Netherlands. People feeling alone in their interests as always. Wow, that is so interesting. Erasmus of Rotterdam. Okay. So we don't know if that's true, but based on what this guy is saying, that this guy was lonely and he was leading the Renaissance up in the Northern Europe. Fate of friends. Life became more dangerous for Spanish Erasmians when Erasmus' protector fell out of favor with the royal court and lost power with his own organization. Okay, death and basal thoughts and views, manner of thinking. Often wrote in highly ironical idiom. A deep and abiding commitment to human flourishing. Erasmus was to be one of those who can get no edification from exegesis where they suspect more misinterpretation. Erasmus's preparedness completely to satisfy no one but himself. Wow, okay. People feeling alone in their interests has always been true to a certain extent, but the internet has made it much worse. The excess of information allows you to travel down your path of interest with mad velocity. On the internet, Wonderland is recursive, with rabbit holes opening up to yet more rabbit holes. You never stop falling, and the further you fall, the less likely it is that anyone you have ever met is falling where you are. This will make you immensely sad. You will visit your parents, and when they ask you about your life, you will have two choices. You can either be incomprehensible and see them grow concerned about things you are excited about, or you can talk about surface level things and cry a little when you are alone at night. The reason I'm spelling out this dynamic is twofold. First, you can get out of this mess if you want to. You do that by writing online or publishing cool pieces of software or videos or whatever makes you tickle, as long as you work in public. Second, if you want to get out of the mess, the key lies exactly in understanding that you are not the only person who has no one to talk to about the things you get obsessed by. When writing in public, there is a common idea that you should make it accessible. This is a leftover from mass media. Words addressed to a large and diverse set of people need to be simple and clear and free of jargon. It is valuable to write clearly, of course, to a degree. Clear writing is clear thinking, but to make the content accessible, to cut digestions and obscure references, to reduce the number of things people need to understand to make sense of your argument, really? This is that is against our purposes here. A blog post is a search query. You write to find your tribe. You write so they will know what kind of fascinating things they should route to your inbox. If you follow common wisdom, you will cut exactly the things that will help you find these people. It is like the time someone told the composer Morton Feldman he should write for the man in the street. Feldman went over and looked out the window, and who did he see? Jackson Pollock. Write for Jackson Pollock. The people you will be able to have deep conversations with have, like you, already been surprised with the simple, clear things. They need more to get high. Ooh, this is so interesting. So he's basically talking about the concept that intellectual stimulation just works like drugs. When you find simpler, you get used to simple things, and now you need more complicated things to make you feel the high of intellectual stimulation. Wow. They need more to get high, and this more will be wildly idiosyncratic. It cannot be summarized in a list of writing rules. So, what do? You ask yourself, what would have made me jump off my chair if I had read it 6 months ago, or a week ago, or however fast you write? If you have figured out something that made you ecstatic, this is what you should write, and you do not dumb it down because you were not stupid 6 months ago and you just knew less. You also write with as much useful detail and beauty as you can muster because that is what you would have wanted. 6 months ago, I was thinking about how large language models will affect how we learn. The essay using GPT-3 to augment human learning would have made me jump off my chair and run out to Joanna talking excitedly and incomprehensibly. That's why I wrote it, to make it interesting for myself. I made it longish and detailed. I like it when people don't just talk in the abstract but show you with examples, preferably many examples, and preferably taken from the real world so they are messy. Some people find this excess annoying. I don't. Rich data lets me develop a tacit understanding of the domain, so I wrote 3,000 words about how to prompt GPT-3 in ways that make it more truthful. And I included a long dialogue where the AI diagnoses Joanna's itching hands, and another one about how cities affect innovation, and a third about digitally mediated apprenticeships. Digitally mediated apprenticeships. I also made the essay a bit literary and flamboyant, which you are not supposed to do when writing about AI, at least not if you want the average less wrong reader to upvote it. I'm not the average less wrong reader. I much prefer Thomas Bernard's rants to Eliezer Yudkowsky's. Hence, I made it flamboyant. I'm not saying it was a great essay. I'm saying I would have loved it. The essay would have answered most of the questions I had. And it would have given me a new, more complex understanding of language models that I could have used to get excited by even more obscure things. And because the internet is big, there were a few thousand people who felt the same way, and I felt really deeply for these people. It is crazy beautiful to have a stranger arrive in your inbox and they are excited by exactly the same things as you. You start dropping the most obscure references and they are like, yeah, read that, love it. The first handful of times that happened, Joanna asked me what was wrong. I was crying in the kitchen. Those were tears of homecoming. And as if that wasn't good enough, now these people are routing me interesting things about language models, cow breeding, quintillion 19th century dictionaries, graph based operating systems, and on and on. I get more and better input than I could ever have found on my own, a lot of it from sources outside the clear web. Tinkerers writing to me about tools they are building or new observations they have made. In other words, I have to a degree automated my obsessions now. I have summoned a milieu that pulls me where I want to go. A search query doesn't have to be a 5,000 word effort post to work, though the internet does reward that amply. Anything that would have been useful to you sometime in the past will do. Alexei Guzzi makes lists, half of which are made up of quotes, and they're incredibly useful and have been instrumental in reshaping his network so that he could start new science. Most good Twitter accounts can be viewed in the same way. Anything that would have been useful to you sometime in the past will do. Anything that would be useful to you sometime in the past will do. Oh, wow. This is really cool. Distribution. If you follow the advice above, you will write essays that almost no one likes. Luckily, almost no one multiplied by the entire population of the internet is plenty if you can only find them. How do you do that? Well, you can probably spot a few of them already, even if you are a fairly naive native internet user. The people you can spot will be those that have large followings. This might depress you. The famous people will seem out of reach, and the rest of the internet will seem to be pure madness. When starting on my model of how it would work was this: I wouldn't find any readers, and if I did, they would be plebeians like myself, and then maybe, hopefully, as I found more of them, I would level up so that I could connect to people with increasingly large followings, like climbing a corporate hierarchy. This is not how it works. The social structure of the internet is shaped like a river. People with big followings say someone like Sam Harris is the mouth of the Mississippi. I don't know where Mississippi is. Okay. Is the mouth of the Mississippi emptying into the Mexican Gulf. Sam has millions of tributaries. There are perhaps a few hundred people Sam pays close attention to, and these in turn have a few hundred they listen to. Tributaries flow into headwaters, flowing into rivers. The way messages spread on the internet is by flowing up this order of streams from people with small networks to those with larger, and then it spreads back down through the larger networks. Going over land from one tributary to other is harder than going up the stream order and then down again. This dynamic is easy to spot on Twitter, where you get notified every time someone likes or retweets what you have written, compared to a blog where the traffic data is more murky. When I tried out the title of this piece as a tweet, a primitive way to A/B test, I could map the dynamic. It was not a viral tweet. I'm a minor tributary in the Twitter river system. My follower count was around 100 at the time, but a few of my followers were slightly larger. They had found me, I assume, because I made replies to their tweets that they sort of liked. Two of these, Steen Haklev and Critch, Tom Critchlow. Okay, 30.7. Resonated with the tweet, so they retweeted it. A few others give it a heart, which is also a way to route tweets, though it is a weaker form of routing than a retweet. Then a few accounts that were an order of magnitude larger still retweeted it because they followed Steen and Tom and now saw it. And from there, it rushed up the stream order. Inside, indie consultant and blogger, a new MBA. Wow, this is very interesting. Every week, give me a push notification. Wow. Oh, another one. The highest leverage activity is writing. I know this. I have known this for half a decade. Every time I write, I see the results and I'm like, the highest leverage activity really is writing. I should do that way more, and yet I still avoid writing. And a few accounts that were an order of magnitude larger still retweeted it because they followed Sheehan and Tom and now saw it. And from there, it rushed up the stream order. It only took an hour or two for the tweet to reach the largest accounts it would reach. Tiago Forte with 84k followers who retweeted it, and Balaji Srinivasan who routed it on through a like. Wow. Okay. But the smaller accounts took much longer. Information rushes up and then trickles down. The larger accounts are not larger without a reason, but at least in part because they spend more time routing information in the network. The larger accounts are not larger without a reason, but at least in part because they spend more time routing information in the network. That is so interesting. The larger accounts are larger because that is kind of their work now. They are in the content business, they are in the writing and intellectual stimulation business. And then they just look at ideas. They just look at good ideas. They don't care where that idea comes from. If that idea is new and interesting, they will pick that, they will share it with their friends, and they will all get the high. That is so interesting. That is so interesting. The larger accounts are not larger without a reason, but at least in part because they spend more time routing information in the network. This, by the way, is how you sent letters before the post service was established. In 1600s, if you were intellectual who wanted to send a letter to another intellectual, you send it to someone who could forward it to Marine Mersenne because he knew everyone who knew anyone and would surely know someone who could find the person you wanted to reach. This I learned from a tweet by Visa, who is the modern day version of Mersenne. Okay, okay. Focus on what you want to see more of. To truly come home to yourself, to own your own trust and respect, you have to unseat the authoritarian tyrant from the throne of your consciousness. You cannot do this by force. That only perpetuates the cycle of cruelty. Instead, you must cultivate courageously a concerted counter-insurgency of kindness, curiosity, and humor. Liberate your inner artist, journalist, and comedian. Break them out of the prison of your fears. Then together perform the most daring of heists to retrieve the jewel of life locked up deep within the tyrant's palace. Tangentially, this is a fascinating example of someone who doesn't have any real familiarity when what they're saying. All the emphasis are on the wrong syllables. What is that?
Share his AI toolset with the government so they can regulate. He is a D-cell with crazy P-doom and zero risk tolerance.
Okay, but can you just talk to him?
Maybe, but the 4 Sigma IQ move is take him out. He wants to share his AI toolset with the government.
I'm actually curious what is this because this recently came out and became like talk of the town. But let's get back. It was the modern day version of Mersenne. Marine Mersenne. Okay, we'll let Grok do that. The trick then is you take the person you think is closest to the person or type of person you want to talk to and send what you write to this person. A subreddit is a good place to start. I usually do this by collecting interesting people on Twitter through a good reply game. Then I can simply post my essays there and know they will have a chance of seeing it occasionally, and this makes more sense in the start. I send essays to people directly in their direct messages or to their email. I send apprenticeship online to Jose Rincon, mostly as a way to give context to a few comments I had on one of his essays. He didn't answer, but he did tweet out the essay, which brought in a handful of interesting people in my orbit. It turns out that if you have written something that you find interesting, it is not unlikely that people you like will find it interesting too and pass it on if you give them the chance. As you start routing information and putting out blog posts, you will begin to accumulate connections. Useful information will start to stream toward you, turning you into a small hub yourself. This will allow you to collect and curate information and route it back out, which will allow even more people to connect to you in a flywheel that lets you do increasingly useful and good work. You'll begin to accumulate connections. Useful information will start to stream toward you, turning into a small hub yourself. This will allow you to connect and curate information and route it back out, which will allow you more people to connect to you in a flywheel that lets you do increasingly useful and good work. I especially enjoy when intelligent people attack me. I then invite them to comment on upcoming drafts. Ooh. I think Signal would find this interesting, so let's give this out to Signal. Marine was a French mathematician, philosopher, and theologian, often called the father of acoustics. Wow. Best known for his studies of prime numbers. Correspondence network connected major thinkers like Descartes, Galileo, and Fermat, fostering scientific exchange in the 17th century. He also contributed to music theory, optics, and the study of cycloids, and defended rational inquiry against skepticism and superstition. Complication from lung. Wow. All right. Let's give this out to Signal. So many people just sit in the middle, terrified of taking a position because they're afraid of being wrong, especially in public, but that fear neuters thinking. You often don't get real clarity without taking a side. Some level of conviction forces you to confront contradictions, sharpen frames, and actually learn. You can also post to subreddits and forums like Less Wrong or the Slate Star Codex subreddit, that act like intellectual cafes on the internet. Pasting your post there, it is easy to find community when you are starting out. You don't have to scream into the void, and more importantly, a lot of people pass through these cafes, and if they are your kind, they can help spread your work in the netherworld of personal connections and open weird doors on the internet for you. I relied heavily on forums in the beginning, gaining my first 100 or so subscribers this way, but they are growing less important now that I've collected a set of connections of my own. I can get a more precise spread of my essays by just emailing them to my subscribers and putting out a few tweets, but I feel deep gratitude, especially to Less Wrong, which provides me with an editor who helps me with grammar and fact checking. By the way, the reason you will eventually grow out of forums is that they are search queries written by other people. Summoned into existence by Eliza Yudowski and Robin Hanson, writing a sequence of exceptionally powerful search queries. One overcoming bias blog post so strong that the networks they create survive the exodus of the original nodes. This is what online writing is at its limit. The summoning of a new culture. If we squint a little, we could even say that this is how internet itself came into existence. Wrote a memo about an intergalactic computer network, and that search query was so powerful that summoned the aliens. We're all living inside his search query now. Intergalactic computer network. Whoa, what is this? First we shape a social graph, then it shapes us. Wow, 9 pages. Advanced Research Projects Agency. members and affiliates of the Intergalactic Computer Network. First, I apologize humbly for having to postpone the meeting scheduled for da 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 da. The ARPA Command and Control Research Office has just been assigned a new task that must be activated immediately, and I must devote the whole of the coming week to where the priority is externally enforced. I'm extremely sorry to inconvenience those of you who have made plans for May 3rd. I shall be in Cambridge the rest of this week. I'm asking my colleagues here to reschedule the meeting with May 10th Palo Alto as target time and place. The need for the meeting and the purpose of the meeting are things that I feel intuitively, not things that I perceive in clear structure. I'm afraid that the fact that fact will be too evident in the following paragraphs. Nevertheless, I shall try to set forth some background material and some thoughts about possible interactions with the various activities in the overall enterprise for which, as you may have detected in the above subject, I'm at a loss for a name. Whoa. Whoa. In the first place, it is evident that we have among us a collection of individual, personal, or organizational aspirations, efforts, activities, and projects. These have in common, I think, the characteristics that they are in some way connected with advancement of the art or technology or of information processing, the advancement of intellectual capability, man, machine, or machine, and the approach to a theory of science. The individual parts are, at least to some extent, mutually interdependent. To make progress, each of the active research needs a software base and a hardware facility more complex and more extensive than he himself can create in reasonable time. Various members of the group will be preparing executive, the monitoring routines, languages, compilers, Let me say again that I have the feeling we should discuss together at some length questions and problems in the set, to which I have tried to point in the foregoing discussion. It is necessary to bring this opus to a close because I have to go catch an airplane. I had intended to review our past command control interest in improved management interaction and time sharing and computer networks. I think, however, that you all understand the reasons for ARPA's basic interest in these matters, and I can, if need be, review them briefly at the meeting. Intergalactic. Wow, this is interesting. This is very interesting. Okay, this was the agentic one. Blogging as economic and social opportunity. Lately, I've been framing all of my work through the lens of increasing agency. Notes on agency at work. So it's no surprise that this piece from Nadia struck a chord. Nadia. Okay. Nadia is... Wait, is this the same Nadia that came out with a book? I don't know. Ever create the desire to persevere when faced with a challenge popularized by psychologist Angela Duckworth has been the human trait du jour of the last 15 odd years. I suspect that agency, a belief in one's ability to influence the circumstances, could be the defining trait of the next generation. We can think of agency in a few different ways, but I particularly like the idea that blogging is an engine for cultivating agency. In my experience, blogging is an incredible force for both economic and social opportunity. The Web 2.0 era created a lot of rich bloggers, but it also cemented this view that making money from blogging is hard work. Making money in any way tends to be hard work, but our view of making money from blogging is too narrow. When I look across the people I know who are bloggers, I think they tend to have greater economic opportunities than those who don't. I only know a handful of people directly making money from blogging via ad subscriptions, but I know many more who got a better career because of blogging, new job, better pay, etc. Negotiated better contracts with the publisher or platform because they had an audience, sold their own courses, ebooks, books, merchandise, music, Blogging is this kind of engine that opens up economic opportunity and advantage. Being visible in the networked economy has real value. Blogging is social opportunity, but blogging is more than economic opportunity. It's an engine for social connection too. A blog post is a very long and complex search query to find fascinating people and make them route interesting stuff to your inbox. Is like summoning an alien intelligence. I post at night after putting my kids to bed and wake in the morning to find my inbox filled with weird and alien brain stuff. Some of it is hallucinogenic crazy, of course, but more often than not, what people have sent helps me accelerate my research by weeks. Reading a list, introduction to other researchers, corrections of flaws in my reasoning. I've been able to progress faster over the last year since starting my Substack than in the 5 previous years combined. Henrik, what's your Twitter? Henrik Carlson. I believe interesting stuff has happened. Yes, I knew that. I knew that. All right, very interesting. Okay, and now let's see if we can find Henrik Carlson. Yes, we found him. Henrik Carlson. I write essays. Okay, Sweeve. Well, Sweeve, you right now thinking about writing as thinking relationships, self cultivation, LMs. A person can be contained in your ideas about them. This was a core idea for us to whatever extent I assume I knew who Joanna was. I treated her as something that I could fit in my head as something smaller than me, but she couldn't fit in my head, nor I in hers. That was the exciting thing about it. You can only ever know another individual if you meet them in open dialogue, if you treat them as unfinished, as capable of surprise. Treat people like they are too complex to fit in your head. Wow. Wow. Okay. That is beautiful. Dostoevsky as lover. And if you don't want to wait, the less shiny Kindle version of Anti-Memetics is now available. Why some ideas resist spreading. Key takeaways from the book Anti-Memetics by Nadia. Let's see. Let's see if we get anything. Paradox of information. While sharing ideas is easier than ever, many valuable ideas are retreating to private spaces like group chats, DMs, and whisper networks rather than public platforms. This shift reflects a move away from the wider attention-driven Web 2.0 era toward more curated private exchanges, making some ideas harder to find. Structural resistance to idea spread. Some ideas fail to spread not because they lack value, but due to structural barriers like complexity, personal discomfort, or lack of incentives to share. The book explores how cultural and technological systems shape what enters public consciousness and what remains obscure. The book connects anti-memetics to the death of the open web, where people are increasingly retreating to private subcultural spaces. The shift results in loss of public narrative, with ideas circulating in closed groups rather than broadly, creating a fragmented information ecosystem. Attention and self-discretion. Elephant in the Brain by Hansen and Similar. The book discusses how attention shapes our awareness. Our brains often suppress uncomfortable or cognitively expensive ideas, selfish motives, or mortality to protect our self-image or avoid social friction, making these ideas anti-mimetic. Rather than disengaging from the noisy, meme-driven online world, the book suggests that noticing end-time memes Ideas lost in the mimetic churn can help individuals reclaim their attention and engage more thoughtfully with the information ecosystem. Super memes is a counterpoint. The book introduces super memes ideas that are hard to forget because they tie to strongly held values and existential risks or lack specificity. These contrast with anti memes and dominant public discourse. Post cancel culture perspective. First post cancel culture book, censorship to explore how ideas naturally resist or evade public attention, offering a reflective rather than reactive take on modern discourse. Draws inspiration from the sci fi novel There Is No Anti Memetics Division by Quantum, which imagines anti memes as supernatural entities. Very interesting. Very interesting. Corrections of flaws in my reasoning, I've been able to progress faster with last year since starting my Substack than in the 5 previous year combined. It's common to think of blogging as building an audience, but this can sound negative, self serving, sleazy, and promotional. Instead, we can think of blogging as finding your people, which sounds much more wholesome, generative, and positive. The truth is that maybe it's a bit of both, but that increasing your social building an audience, but this can sound negative, self-serving, sleazy, promotion. Instead of, we can think of blogging as finding a people, which sounds much more wholesome, generative, and positive. The truth is that maybe it's a bit of both, but that increasing a social surface area can have real positive effects, from finding peers to building friendships to, yes, influence an audience. So if blogging is a real force for economic and social opportunity, why don't more people do it? What is the GDP of blogging? Stripe's mission is to increase GDP of the internet. The recent investor letter mentions writer, walker, and bookmaker Craig Maud. Great example of someone who has leveraged online writing into economic and social opportunity, from funding and distributing his books to paid writing gigs to building a special projects revenue stream to enable long walks. Interested in the GDP of the internet, and Stripe understands that writing is an economic engine. Maybe it's not so crazy to ask what the GDP of blogging is. Perhaps unironically, you could invest in growing the small business economy by investing in blogging. Teaching agency via blogging. Let's return to Nadia's quote from the top. I think this is part of why I'm weirdly passionate and excited about blogging, because the barrier to entry is almost zero. Blogging is this very accessible tool for teaching people about personal agency, a simple platform for increasing people's economic and social opportunities. There's something here. It's partly why, despite the narrative that blogging is dead, we see things like Rite of Passage and Ship 30 for 30 being incredibly popular. Squad Wealth, Squad Publishing. Agency, of course, is a social condition. You can have an individual sense of agency, but your degrees of freedom are always influenced by environment, which is why squads are so important. The seminal piece, Squad Wealth, talks about the emerging entwining of the social and financial economies. But can squads scale? Squads are first and foremost cultures, not businesses. Financial maximization is not their primary objective. Squads just want to keep the vibes going. Stable revenue is a worthy accomplishment in and of itself. Instead, squads can extend themselves horizontally by inventing new aesthetics, organizational forms, and creative products that become the template for others. When squad vibes transmit, they take on a life of their own. While the material value of these patterns may be limited, the significance of memeing a new bottom-up economic model into existence cannot be understated. Maybe for squad agency, we need squad publishing. Even in today's hyper media environment, almost all acts of creation are one-to-one between author and work. Publishing on the internet is inherently an individual act. There are vanishingly few examples, though they do exist in oddball corners of the internet, of squad publishing. We need to use the term blogosphere, an organic sounding term, but what if we took the idea of ecosystem seriously? How might we enable our digital gardens to commingle and run wild? How can we build shared community gardens with co authors and shared ownership? Very interesting. Okay, that's a stream.